Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Proud sponsors of Real Health with Carl Henry.
Hello and welcome to Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. Folks, over the last few years, positive affirmations have become incredibly popular. While some swear by it, others who have tried it may find it a difficult habit to get into. How useful is positive thinking? Can it really be transformative? Or are we living in a world where constant desire to be happy has become a little bit toxic? Well, today I'm joined by psychotherapist and author of the book Toxic Positivity, Whitney Goodman, to discuss how too much positivity can turn negative. Whitney, all the way from Miami, a very big welcome to the show. How's it going? Expressing something that so many people felt, but no one else was willing to express it.
Yeah, it was really polarized, which is why I decided to stick with that phrasing of toxic positivity, because so many people were like, this is stupid. How can positivity even be toxic? And then there were people who were like, wow, this is exactly what I've been feeling for so much of my life.
Okay. And what about, if when you see this kind of content and you follow people online who are delivering these, the kind of, the everything is brilliant posts, even when it's not. And is there fear that if you don't agree with that you're seeing as, a phrase we would have in Ireland would be a negative Nelly, that you're seeing as a negative person for disagreeing with it?
Yeah. Yeah, so here it's like a negative Nancy in the US. And I think it's a similar sentiment that there is this fear of being seen as negative. Like, I think that's the thing that we fear, is like that people aren't going to like us if we're not positive, or they're going to think that there's something wrong with us if we're not positive. And so we have to constantly be putting on this act even when it doesn't feel genuine.
I think generally there's a sense now of, we're pushing towards this kind of utopia of feeling positive all the time, that things are great and things are fabulous and we should all be feeling that way. There's a pressure almost to be like that. Is that a fair comment? And is that something that you're seeing both through Instagram but also with your practice as well?
Totally. It's absolutely a fair comment. I think social media has really played into that desire. We're constantly looking at the lives of other people that appear to be perfect and happy and great. And it's almost this idea that, like, if I can just find a way to emulate that, then I will never feel anything distressing or bad. And that's enticing. it would be nice, to not have to deal with the human condition of experiencing emotions.
And it's not a healthy thing people should be aspiring to. Presumably it's not from a mental health perspective.
For sure. It's not. And I think that's what I ultimately found through my research and my work as a therapist is that this goal that we're striving towards is actually going to make us more miserable because we're missing out on so much good data and information and experiences when we try to avoid everything in life that isn't happiness or positivity.
Okay, so it's normal to not be happy all the time, and trying to aspire to that is almost setting yourself up for failure.
Totally. I mean, as a human being, you are going to feel a wide range of emotions, and some of them are going to be like because you just didn't drink enough water, you didn't sleep well. Some of them are going to have deeper meaning that you need to investigate. But all of those feelings have value. And when we try to eliminate anxiety, fear, depression, all these things from our life, we're never really going to know what are the things that we need to stop doing? What do we need to change? What might be harmful? And so we really end up kind of like putting ourselves in this box that's totally unattainable and unsustainable.
And is it about trying to find that happy medium then? Should we be looking to strive for a medium where you have good days, you have bad days, there are things that make you happy, there are things that make you not so happy? Is that the aim, I suppose, or the goal from a mental health perspective?
Absolutely. There's a concept called radical acceptance that's part of dialectical behavioral therapy I talk about in the book. And that's really just that we can accept that things are bad. We can also have hope for the future. And we can accept things and say, I may not really like this, but this is how life is. I also am a huge fan of living in accordance with our values. And when we do that, we know that I'm on the right path. I'm doing what's important to me. And that's going to bring up a wide variety of emotions, not just happiness all the time.
Okay, so creating those values then is a really important part of setting yourself up for the right way. So finding what's really important to you from a values perspective. Chat us through that a little bit more.
Yeah, so your values are really like your roadmap for life, and it's constantly changing depending on your age. So when I was like in my early 20s, I may have prioritized values like spontaneity, freedom, fun, and now I'm a parent with a career, and maybe I want more stability and family and routine are values of mine. And so thinking about like, how can I back those values up with action? What is my life going to look like on a daily basis if that's what I'm prioritizing? And then remembering that, like, for people who have children, you may love your kids. That's a value of yours. It's important to you, but it doesn't always bring you happiness or joy in every single moment. There are also moments that are hard involved in all of that.
And again, I think the parenting thing's a really interesting angle on it. That again, they're normal. It's normal to have tough days. It's normal to have, it's not all roses and reading your book at bedtime. It's normal to have hard days and frustrating days, and all those emotions are regular. And it's not all about, again, the toxic positivity where people, on Instagram or wherever, it's brilliant and it's fantastic, and it is regular to have tough days and bad days.
Absolutely. I think so many of us have this feeling of like, I'm the only one that feels like this. No one else is struggling as much as me. No one else is having as many bad days. And that's where that like cultural force of toxic positivity comes in, right? Is telling us that you're the only one that feels this way. And I want people to really take away that that's just not accurate. Everybody has bad days. And I'm a therapist. I hear about those bad days all day long, so I can speak from authority on that one.
And chat me through. I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on the impact of things like Instagram. Not just Instagram on its own, but social media in general. That kind of toxic view of the perfect lifestyle and the perfect body and the perfect car and the perfect family and the perfect partner. And it all looks wonderful. They might have taken 20 photographs to get the perfect photograph. But, I'm fascinated by the impact of that on people's mental health and around that idea of that toxic positivity and the toxic almost view of the perfect everything. And how people can manage that if they find that they are being impacted by it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we have to remind ourselves, and I do this myself often, is how much do you show about yourself on the internet? How much are you leaving out? And really remind yourself that, like, if you're only showing about 10%, 20% maybe if you're like an influencer. The other person probably is doing the same thing. And so really not trying to look at that tiny sliver as the full picture is so important.
That's a really good, yeah. In all fairness, that's a really good way of looking at it in terms of the input. That if you're, if you're only showing 10-15% of your own life, there's a fair chance that the person's showing there or even less. It's a really, it's a fantastic aspect of that, because we do see certainly here in Ireland that the impact of social media in terms of people trying to aspire to these things that are unattainable because they're viewing it a certain way. But it's a fantastic way to, it's a fantastic angle on it. And in terms of people who do struggle with, so obviously the obvious things to recommend for them is less, it's less screen time. It's reducing your time on social media. Presumably is the biggest step they can make.
I think less screen time is always good, especially if it's getting in the way of you doing other things for yourself. But sometimes that can feel difficult for people, especially because it is such a big part of our lives. And so another thing I ask people to do is to really think about, like, what types of content are you consuming and how is it making you feel about your life? So the content you're consuming should be inspirational, educational, supportive in some way. We don't need to go on there and scroll just to make ourselves feel bad. I know, like, while I was pregnant, I was following all these like influencers who were modeling or whatever, and I was like, oh, this is making me feel terrible. I got to unfollow all these people, and that's okay. You can go back to that at other times in your life, but really being aware and conscious that you get to create what you view there. No one's, besides ads, no one's really forcing all of that into your phone. And unfollow, mute people, don't look at their stuff if it's negatively impacting you.
Folks, you're listening to Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. Chat me through work and toxic positivity in the workplace. I think this is a really interesting angle. Again, through COVID, we've seen in the workplace, there's a huge, sense of just overly positive and almost trying to, neglect the fact that we're in a global pandemic. Toxic positivity in the workplace is really common, and it's, and it is a real problem.
Yeah, I think we've been sold this idea that in order to move ahead in the workplace, you have to be positive all the time. And I don't want to diminish the impact or the power of a good attitude and being a team player. That's all important. But what I find is that people are often being asked to silence concerns, worries, whatever it is, in the name of a positive work culture. And the research really shows us that when we do that, it stifles creativity. It makes people feel less connected to their work and to the community. And it ultimately ends with people leaving their jobs because they don't feel supported or like the people around them have empathy for them.
Okay, so if anyone's listening in who's in a position of power within a workplace, it's trying to create a culture of being able to talk about the pros and the cons, the goods and the bads, and an acceptance around that in terms of staff well-being.
So the biggest thing you can do is really not overcomplicate this. I think, especially for us here in the US, we've tried to create this positive work culture by having parties and pizza and bar carts and all this stuff. And it's people really want the simple human things. They want to know that you're there for them, that you care about more than what they can provide in the workplace, that you have empathy for them, and also that you create spaces where their concerns can be heard. So the biggest thing I recommend is having some type of built-in structure or space in the workplace that people can go to when they have concerns, and they can feel heard, listened to, and someone can say to them, hey, that's something we can fix, or tell them, sorry, we don't have the resources to fix that right now, or come up with some other type of intervention.
Positive thinking and wellness. That's the next topic I want to have a chat about. So again, as part of the wellness industry, there's a huge push of, it's all about thinking positive and it's all wonderful and fabulous. But, it is important, to have a more balanced view of the world. But in some respects, some elements of positive thinking can improve your wellness and have a positive impact on your health too.
Absolutely. So what I find in wellness is that people are kind of on that extreme of you need to be positive if you're going to be healthy. You need to be positive if you're going to get through this. And what we find is that radical acceptance piece, that being able to be in the middle, is the healthiest place for you mentally. When people have mental flexibility and the ability to understand that things can be both hard and good at the same time, and they're kind of able to switch in between the two and stay in that gray area, those are the people that we see have the most success in life because they don't get stuck in either place. People who focus too much on positivity and actually try to live only in that place have actually been shown to have less skills for dealing with conflict, with difficulty, because they're not prepared, and they're more shocked when difficult things come up and unable to handle them.
Okay. People who you surround yourself with, I'm intrigued by this one, obviously, in terms of on both ways. So sometimes people are overly positive, and again, that's toxic in its own right, but those who are negative can be toxic too. Chat us through the importance of your direct influence, your direct network of people who are around you, and the impact they can have on your own mental health.
I think it's important to have a diverse group of people around you that have different skill sets for helping you through hard things, right? Or for being there for you when you need a positive influence or support. What I find is that our circles have gotten so small that now we rely on one or two people to fill all of these roles. And I think that's when we start calling people negative or wanting them to be more positive for us, because we're all going through our own stuff all the time. And there's going to be seasons where people can't be there for you or they can't be as helpful. And so I always like to point out that there's a big difference between like your friend that's always complaining about like the weather or the food and somebody who is grieving or going through a breakup or a loss. And we have to be careful not to call that second person negative, because we might also be in a place one day where we need a little bit of extra support, or we need someone to understand why it's hard for us.
And if you're feeling, or you're in a relationship, not even from a sexual perspective, but even from a friend's perspective, where you feel it's having a negative impact on your mental health most of the time, is there a way people should deal with that? Is there a way people can approach that? Or is there a method to be able to help people in that scenario?
So I think it's really nuanced, just because depending on what the person is going through, and you don't want to, of course, say to someone who's struggling with their mental health, like, hey, you're such a negative influence on my life, like I'm cutting you out, because that could be very detrimental to them. So I think coming back to like, what can I control? What are my boundaries? If I notice that this person is having a negative impact on me, maybe I want to spend less time with them. Maybe I don't want to call them when I have good news because they can't be there for me. Maybe I want to ask them like, hey, are you okay? You've seemed like you've been pretty down lately, or I noticed that you've been more negative, and trying to just think about what can I do in my own life to control this, not putting the responsibility all on them.
Again, really good point. So it comes back to your values. It comes back to that and analyzing yourself a little bit, as opposed to looking to blame others. It's putting yourself in the driver's seat, that you control, and you're in control of the relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the questions we always ask guests who come on are kind of top takeaway tips I'd love people to get from the episode. So for the people who are listening in today, if you had 3 simple things you would like them to do or like them to take away from the app, what would those 3 things be? I know it's a horrible question, but I always ask it because it's a nice question to ask.
No, it's good. I think the conversation we had about social media, curating your feed to fit your life and what you need, is so important. Realizing that all emotions have value and that we can utilize them in certain ways in our life. And then remembering that you're able to set boundaries with the people in your life that may be having a negative influence on you.
Whitney Goodman, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. Remind us again of your Instagram account where people can find you and the name of the book.
Yeah, you can find me on social media, Instagram, etc. at Sit with Wit. And my book is Toxic Positivity, and it's being sold anywhere books are sold. You can also find it through my website, sitwithwit.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Miami today. We really, really appreciate it. Folks, that's it for another episode of Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Health. You know where we are, realhealth@independent.ie, at Carl Henry PT on Instagram. We're back next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.
Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Proud sponsors of Real Health with Carl Henry.